She was always sure of what she didn't want, especially when it came to him. Amidst taunts and forced encounters, all they did was argue. But fate, with its unpredictable sense of humour, decided to put them on the same path. Again and again. What started as dislike turned into something she couldn't even name, and by the time she realised it, it was too late to run away. After all, the heart has its own plans, even when reason insists on denying them. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Lydia Reynolds checked the clock for the third time in the last 5 minutes. The party at her friend Olivia's house had barely started, and she already felt a twinge of regret for coming. The apartment was getting crowded, but her gaze scanned the room for a specific person she hoped not to encounter. Looking for someone? Olivia's voice emerged from behind her, accompanied by a glass of wine she offered Lydia. Actually, I'm hoping not to find someone, Lydia replied, accepting the drink. You didn't invite David, did you? Olivia bit her lower lip, with a guilty expression that Lydia knew all too well. You know he's my boyfriend's best friend, Lydia. I couldn't not invite him. Lydia rolled her eyes and took a generous sip of wine. Great. How long do I have until that clown arrives? As if to answer her question, a loud and familiar laugh echoed from the entrance, followed by several others. David Carter had arrived, and as always, he was already the centre of attention. At 28, David was the kind of person who lit up any room with his contagious energy. Tousled brown hair, bright green eyes, and a smile that seemed to never leave his face. For Lydia, however, he was the embodiment of immaturity. See? He barely got in and he's already making a scene, Lydia murmured to Olivia, who smiled conciliatorily. Give him a chance, Lydia. Everyone loves David. Everyone except me, she replied, taking another sip. Unlike David, Lydia valued seriousness and organisation. At 26, she was an administrative manager at an architecture firm, known for her efficiency and professionalism. Her always impeccably tied black hair, sober clothes and meticulously organised schedule reflected her structured personality. David's chaotic spontaneity irritated her deeply. It didn't take long for their paths to cross at the party. David spotted Lydia trying to hide in a corner of the kitchen and with a mischievous smile walked toward her. If it isn't the most serious woman in town, he exclaimed, opening his arms dramatically. I can't believe you left your office on a Saturday night. And I can't believe you're still making the same jokes as always, Lydia replied, trying to maintain her composure. Oh, come on, Lydia. Admit that you miss my jokes when I'm not around. In the same way I miss a headache, she retorted, making him laugh even more. David leaned on the counter, moving slightly closer. You know, one day you'll realise that we're perfect for each other and you'll marry me. I would never marry someone like you, Lydia declared firmly, as she had done on numerous previous occasions. That's what we'll see, he replied with a wink, before being called by another friend and walking away, leaving behind his woody fragrance that, to Lydia's annoyance, was surprisingly pleasant. The night went on with Lydia watching, frustrated, as David charmed everyone with his stories and antics. Several women laughed exaggeratedly at his jokes, leaning in to touch him casually while they talked. For some reason she didn't want to examine, this bothered her more than it should have. After 2 hours of enduring this scene, Lydia decided that she had had enough. She discreetly said goodbye to Olivia, ignoring her pleas to stay a little longer, and was almost at the door when she heard David's voice again. Leaving already, Lydia? The night has just begun. She turned, facing him with a studied look of boredom. Some of us have responsibilities, David. We don't live just for fun. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw something like hurt in his eyes, quickly replaced by the usual playful sparkle. One day you'll find out that responsibility and fun are not mutually exclusive, you know. When that day comes, maybe I'll consider marrying you, Lydia replied sarcastically, turning to leave. I'll hold you to that promise, he shouted at her back as she closed the door with more force than necessary. Lydia's phone rang insistently the next morning, pulling her from a deep sleep. She fumbled for the bedside table, finding the device on the fourth ring. "Hello?" she murmured sleepily. "Lydia, dear, I hope I didn't wake you." Her mother, Denise's cheerful voice sounded on the other end of the line. Lydia sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. "No, it's fine, Mum. It was time to get up anyway." A white lie. "Great. I'm calling to invite you to lunch today. I have someone very special I want you to meet." Lydia's drowsiness vanished instantly. In the 7 years since her father had passed away, her mother Denise had never mentioned any romantic interest. "Mum, are you dating someone?" A brief silence followed by a nervous giggle that Lydia hadn't heard in years. "Yes, dear. His name is Mark. We met in the gardening class at the community centre a few months ago." Lydia smiled, genuinely happy. Her mother deserved to find someone after so many years alone. "I would love to meet him, Mum." "Wonderful. Shall we meet at Luigi's restaurant at noon?" After hanging up, Lydia felt a mix of emotions. Joy for her mother, curiosity about Mark, and a slight apprehension about this new family dynamic that might form. At 12:05 p.m, Lydia entered the restaurant, quickly spotting her mother seated at a table in the back, next to a man with a distinguished appearance. Mark appeared to be around 60 years old, like Denise, with well-trimmed grey hair and a warm smile that made Lydia like him immediately. "You must be Lydia," he said, standing up to greet her. "Your mother talks a lot about you." "I hope good things," Lydia replied, smiling as she sat down. The conversation flowed naturally. Mark was a university professor of literature, with a refined sense of humour and an evident kindness in the way he treated Denise. Lydia watched, enchanted, as her mother seemed rejuvenated beside him, her eyes shining in a way she hadn't seen since her father was alive. "My son should be here," Mark commented, checking his watch. "He is always late. I apologise for that." "Don't worry," assured Lydia. "I'm sure that—" Her words were interrupted when a familiar figure appeared at the restaurant entrance, animatedly gesturing to the waiter as he headed towards their table. Lydia's world seemed to slow down. There, walking towards her with the same carefree smile from the night before, was David Carter. Their eyes met and she saw the exact moment when recognition hit his eyes, first turning into surprise and then into amusement. "You?" they both exclaimed simultaneously. Mark and Denise looked at each other, confused. "Do you already know each other?" Denise asked, surprised. David recovered first, his smile widening as he pulled a chair next to Lydia. "Oh, yes. Lydia and I are old friends." "Acquaintances," Lydia corrected automatically. "We have the same circle of friends." "And here I was, planning to introduce you two, thinking you might get along," Mark said, laughing. "I can't believe this," murmured Lydia, as David leaned towards her. "I think fate is trying to tell us something, future wife," he whispered, just for her to hear. "Not even in your dreams, Carter," she replied through gritted teeth, keeping a forced smile so as not to worry her mother. The lunch proceeded in a strange balance between genuinely pleasant moments — Mark was really charming — and the silent tension between Lydia and David. To her surprise, David behaved with a maturity he had never shown before. He spoke about his work as a graphic designer with genuine passion, asked Denise thoughtful questions, and clearly adored his father. As the meal came to an end, Lydia found herself in an internal conflict. The David she saw now, interacting warmly with her father and being surprisingly respectful, seemed like a completely different person from the clown she knew. The following months were a whirlwind of emotions for Lydia. Denise and Mark announced their engagement just 6 months after that lunch, and suddenly she found herself involved in wedding preparations, constantly in David's company. Meetings with the florist, catering tastings, visits to venues for the ceremony. On each occasion there he was, alternating between the mature behaviour he had shown at lunch and the teasing that irritated her so much. "What do you think of this arrangement?" David asked during a visit to the florist, holding a bouquet of white lilies. "It's beautiful," replied Lydia, surprised by the elegant choice. "Great. I'll save the idea for our wedding," he added with a wink. Lydia rolled her eyes but couldn't help a small smile. "You never give up, do you?" "Persistence is one of my best qualities," he replied, handing the bouquet back to the florist. There were moments, brief and unexpected, when Lydia found herself genuinely enjoying David's company. Like when he noticed her fatigue after a long meeting with the wedding planner and quietly brought her a coffee made just the way she liked it. Or when he defended her opinions about the ceremony's music, even when Denise tried to convince her to accept a more traditional band. But whenever these moments threatened to change her perception of him, David would say or do something silly that reminded her why she considered him immature. Denise and Mark's wedding was a charming ceremony in a garden on a sunny spring afternoon. Lydia watched, moved as her mother beamed radiantly beside her new husband. And she noticed how David looked at his father, with a mix of admiration and genuine joy that deeply touched her. "I've never seen my father so happy," he commented when their eyes met during the reception. No teasing, no jokes, just a sincerity that caught Lydia off guard. "My mother, too," she replied softly. "They deserve it." For a moment, they remained silent, a mutual understanding passing between them. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could find some sort of truce for the sake of their parents' happiness. This fragile truce was put to the test 3 months later when Mark suffered a heart attack. David's call came at 2 a.m, his voice tense and devoid of any trace of his usual good humour. "We're at Central Hospital. My father, David couldn't finish the sentence. "I am on my way," Lydia replied immediately, her heart racing with fear. The hospital was quiet when she arrived, finding her mother in the waiting room, her face pale and hands trembling. David was nowhere to be seen. "How is he?" Lydia asked, hugging Denise. "Stable, thank God. The doctors say we got here in time." Her mother took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. David noticed the symptoms. If it weren't for him... At that moment, David appeared in the hallway carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folded blanket under his arm. His eyes were red and tired, but his face lit up slightly upon seeing Lydia. "Denise, I brought a blanket and a coffee since you will be spending the night here with my father," he said, handing the items to his stepmother. Turning to Lydia, he offered the second cup. "I thought you might need this too." "Thank you," murmured Lydia, surprised by the consideration. In the hours that followed, Lydia witnessed a side of David she had never seen before. He treated the nurses with respect and gratitude, spoke with the doctors asking pertinent questions, and constantly made sure that Denise was comfortable and informed. When they were finally able to see Mark briefly, the kindness with which David helped his father drink water and the way he held his hand made something melt inside Lydia. "Do you want me to take you home so you can get some rest?" David asked Denise after the visit. "I can come back and stay with him tonight." "No, dear, I want to stay," Denise replied, "but you should go rest." David hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave his father. It was Lydia who intervened. "I can stay with my mother tonight. You can return in the morning, rested." Their eyes met, a silent communication passing between them. Gratitude in his eyes, understanding in hers. "I'll call if there is any change," promised Lydia. He nodded, gently squeezing her shoulder before leaving. Mark was discharged a week later, significantly weaker, but out of danger. During this period, David and Lydia developed a non-verbal routine of rotation and mutual support. The teasing disappeared, replaced by efficient and surprisingly comfortable cooperation. "Thank you for being here," David said one night as they walked together through the hospital parking lot. "It means a lot to my dad, too." "It's the least I could do," Lydia replied. "And thank you for taking such good care of my mom. She has really grown attached to you." A comfortable silence enveloped them as they walked side by side, their arms occasionally touching. The parking lot was dimly lit, but Lydia could see the thoughtful expression on David's face, so different from his usual playful smile. "You know," he finally said, "I never told you why I am like this." "Like what?" "Always joking, making jokes." He stuffed his hands into his pockets, looking at the night sky. "When my mother left us, I was 10 years old. My father fell into a deep depression. For months, I hardly saw him smile." Lydia felt a lump in her throat, never having imagined this side of David's story. "So I started doing everything I could to make him laugh. Silly antics, goofy jokes, anything. And it worked. Gradually, he started to smile again." David shrugged. "I guess it became a habit. If I can make people smile, maybe their pain will be a little less, even if just for a moment." At that moment, under the dim light of the parking lot post, Lydia saw David, really saw him, for the first time. Not the annoying clown she had always considered him to be, but a man who used humour as a way to care for others, who hid a depth she had never bothered to see. "I guess I misjudged you," she admitted softly. David smiled, not his usual wide grin, but something softer, more genuine. "And I probably overdid it with the teasing. It's just that you look adorable when you're annoyed." Lydia felt her cheeks warm up, grateful for the partial darkness. "Don't start," she warned, but without the usual irritation. "All right," he agreed, raising his hands in surrender. "Truce?" "Truce," she nodded, surprised to realize that she genuinely wished for this peace between them. In the months that followed, Mark's recovery brought a new dynamic between David and Lydia. The teasing continued, but it now had a different tone, more affectionate than irritating. They began to meet even when it wasn't related to their parents, first under pretexts like returning a borrowed book or discussing concerns about Mark's health, then simply because they wanted each other's company. The first kiss happened on a rainy day, when David appeared at Lydia's apartment door, drenched and carrying her work folder that she had forgotten in his car after a family dinner. "You could have waited until tomorrow," she said, trying to ignore how his wet shirt clung to his chest. "And leave you without your precious reports. Never." He smiled that smile that, she had to admit, now made her heart race instead of rolling her eyes. "Do you want to come in and dry off?" "Are you inviting me into your apartment voluntarily, Lydia Reynolds? I'm shocked." "Don't push your luck, Carter," she replied, but the smile on her lips betrayed her severe tone. As he dried himself with a towel she had offered, their eyes met, and something in the air changed. The tension that had always existed between them transformed into something completely different. "You know," David said, approaching slowly, "you never said again that you wouldn't marry me." "Maybe I am reconsidering my position," Lydia replied, surprising herself with the admission. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if they were both testing unknown waters. Then it became something deeper, more certain than anything Lydia had ever felt. 3 years after that party at Olivia's house, Lydia stood at the entrance of the church, her white dress flowing around her like a cloud, the bouquet of white lilies in her hands trembling slightly. Through the slightly open doors, she could see David at the altar, nervously talking with his best man. "Ready, dear?" Denise asked, adjusting her daughter's veil with tear-filled eyes. Next to her, Mark smiled proudly, his arm firmly linked with Lydia's, ready to lead her down the aisle. "Who would have thought," he commented, "that you two who used to fight all the time would end up like this?" Lydia smiled, reminiscing about the annoyance she felt upon seeing David, and all the time she had firmly declared that she would never marry someone like him. "Sometimes," she replied as the church doors opened completely, "life surprises us in the best possible way." And when her eyes met David's at the end of the hallway, with his radiant smile and eyes sparkling with love, Lydia knew, with absolute certainty, that she had never been so happy to be wrong in her entire life. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.